Asalaamu alaikum and welcome back to Reborn Muslim, the podcast by and for reverts to Islam. I'm your host Avalon, and today I want to talk about boundaries. So I want to talk about setting boundaries specifically as a revert to Islam after you accept Islam as your faith and start your journey as a Muslim. Because I think this is something that's not really talked about. As with everything I talk about on this podcast, it's not something discussed quite enough, and it has been such a huge part of my journey, or at least the interpersonal aspect of it. So, Bismillah, let's get started. So briefly, I'll just touch on why I think boundaries are so important. As I already said, this has been a huge thing for me, in my process of becoming Muslim, because I've learned the value of setting boundaries and to take care of your mental health, prioritize your mental health, and to remember when, the situations in which you do not owe somebody an explanation. You don't owe someone a conversation about whatever it might be, or where you have to distance yourself, you have to cut someone off, or you have to just spend less time around someone because it's affecting your deen or it's affecting your mental health, which oftentimes go hand in hand. So, with that in mind, let's get started talking about specific boundaries that I have found I've had to set, and just kind of a guideline of what you might expect if you're a new revert, or just as a reminder if you have been a revert for a while, or honestly, this is applicable to born Muslims as well. Boundaries that we would have to set with different categories of people. So, the categories that I'll be going over are first, family. Again, since this podcast is, coming from the perspective of being a revert, this is assuming your family is not Muslim. So, the first group I'll talk about is family. The second group is with non Muslim friends. And the last group is with fellow Muslims. So, first up, let's talk about family, setting boundaries with your non Muslim family. So, when I started thinking about, what boundaries have I really had to set with my family, pretty hard boundaries, I think the first thing that came to my mind, and something that a lot of reverts struggle with, myself included, is holidays, like non Muslim holidays. Of course, again, my parents and my family is not Muslim. So, all the holidays they celebrate are non-Muslim holidays or Christian holidays. So especially, Christmas or Easter, these are explicitly celebrations of Jesus, peace be upon him, through the Christian interpretation. So seeing him as the Son of God, as they do. So this has been such a complicated and weird territory to navigate because I'm coming from the background of celebrating these holidays for my whole life. I've always celebrated them. They've been a part of my life since I was a little kid, since I could remember. And I think if you're a born Muslim, think about how many memories you might have surrounding Eid and Ramadan. And now think about, for us, those memories don't exist from when we were a kid. Those memories only exist for us as adults once we already accepted Islam. And the memories that do exist about holidays are all Christian holidays for a lot of us, or perhaps whatever religion you grew up, or, even if you grew up an atheist, you probably celebrated Christmas if you live out here in the West. So it's very complicated, and there's a lot of feelings involved because all of a sudden I have to stop celebrating. You know what I mean? I can't celebrate these holidays now because I'm Muslim. Like, it just feels so strange. It doesn't feel right. Honestly, it does not feel right. And especially for your family, it can feel like a slap in the face, to be honest, because they're like, think about all the memories we have together of Christmas morning, of you opening presents, and on Easter, doing Easter egg hunt and all of these things and going to church together. Like, we have all these years of memories. And then I feel like for the non-Muslim family, it can feel like you're throwing that in the trash. And you're saying, well, none of that means anything to me. None of the traditions mean anything to me. And I'm Muslim now, so I'm better than y'all. And I don't want to take part in any of this. So that's how it can feel for them. So, one thing I'll mention is that we have to be very sensitive about how we approach it with them in mind, especially if they are trying to be supportive. Because some families are just flat out not supportive, not even trying, not interested, done. But some families, they might not be doing it right. They might not be going about it the way we wish they would, but they're trying, they're trying to be supportive. So we never want to push them away in that instance. Never, ever, ever. We never want to do that because it is said so many times in the Quran, and we know as Muslims how important it is to respect our parents, to be good to our parents and to our family. and they have rights over us. So we should never be pushing them away unnecessarily, and hurting their feelings, but we do have to set boundaries. And so how this looked for me, I honestly I wasn't really familiar with like if it's okay to celebrate holidays or not when I was a new Muslim, and probably for the first year or so. So the first Christmas after me reverting to Islam, I still celebrated with my family fully, and bought gifts and accepted gifts and everything. And then this last Christmas, like half a year ago now, my family made it easier because they did like I can't remember the name of it, but it's like an exchange where you only get one gift for like the whole family just draws names, you know what I'm saying? And then you just get a gift for that one person that you drew their name. And so we did that, which was easier because I felt like I was participating less, because the way I saw it is kind of like every year I can dwindle down less and less. So then I just had to get one gift. And we specifically made it that you had to make something. Instead of going out and buying something, we said you have to make something for the other person so they can feel special. So I did that. The whole family did that. And it also would have been awkward to not participate in that because everyone drew one name, you know what I mean? And I definitely could have just not done that at all, but it just felt like the natural thing to do, to just make a gift, do that, and then accept a gift. And then my plan is going forward to again dwindle down as much as possible again this year to where I'm not accepting gifts and not getting gifts. And then from then on, just not doing that. And I don't know the exact answer when it comes to like what can you do, what can't you do. It's very complicated. I knew a sister who would still go on Christmas morning and have coffee with her family, spend time with them, but obviously would tell them, I can't accept gifts and I'm not bringing gifts, but I just want to spend time with you because I care about you because you're my family and I want to be here on your special day. But just making it very clear, it's not my special day. And I really respect that. And I think that I can definitely see myself doing something like that in the future, because spending time with your family isn't the problem. Celebrating the holiday is the problem. And I know people will say, oh, well, like it's fine to celebrate it anyways, because it's not even really a Christian holiday. Like it's actually, the actual things that we do, like having a Christmas tree and giving gifts and all of these things, those are actually pagan celebrations. That's something people say a lot. Well, it's pagan, so it doesn't even matter. It's not even a Christian celebration. And I think that's disingenuous, because who says we should be celebrating pagan holidays? You see what I'm saying? Like, we shouldn't be celebrating anybody's holidays except for our own. And we shouldn't even be overly glamorizing those. We should be making sure they're God conscious and, like, centered around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala no matter what. So that's not an excuse that I buy, because it sucks, honestly, because a lot of born Muslims will say that. They'll be like, it's okay to celebrate Christmas because it's pagan holiday. I'm like, where are you getting information? Who told you we should celebrate pagan holidays? We shouldn't. That's very strange to me. We shouldn't celebrate anything that's not Muslim, in my opinion, and in the opinion of any scholar I've ever heard. We shouldn't celebrate Christian or Jewish or Buddhist or pagan or any kind of holiday. Not because we hate them, but because it's not our faith and we don't want to take part in that and misconstrue what we believe in. So, with that being said, again, it's very complicated. It's a very difficult place to navigate. But I would recommend, from my own experiences, what I would say is the best thing is, again, to just slowly over time introduce the ideas of Islam and why you're not taking part in this, why you don't believe in these things. And, if you come from an atheist background, it might be more difficult because your family's probably like, but we literally don't even believe in God. So, it's not even a religious holiday. Again, it's kind of difficult to navigate. But hopefully, if your family has respect for you, inshallah, it won't be too difficult. And just over time, again, kind of just like cutting back on how much you participate in, until eventually it's just a matter of like, maybe, again, maybe you just want to go there and be there with your family, but not participate whatsoever. That would probably be the goal in my mind. So that is one very specific instance of boundaries that need to be set as a revert with your family going forward after you come to Islam. But just in a more general sense, there are going to be boundaries that you need to set, and it's going to depend on your family. So if you have a very supportive family, alhamdulillah, the boundaries are going to look a little different and it might be a lot easier. Maybe it won't, like it depends. But I think if your family is very open minded and kind and not judgmental about you being Muslim, it's just going to make the whole process a lot easier. I can't really say that's how it was for me whatsoever. And I will say, like, if your family's not supportive of your decision, if they don't like Muslims, etc., it might be a lot more difficult. But inshallah, Allah will make it easy for all of us. So boundaries are going to look different from person to person. Again, based on the family, like how supportive they are, but also based on what kind of background you're coming from. So some boundaries I definitely had to get used to were saying no to alcohol or not being present when alcohol was being consumed, because according to my knowledge, and as I always say, I'm not a scholar, refer to a scholar, but I believe we need to avoid even sitting at the same table as others who are drinking alcohol, not just drinking alcohol ourselves. Obviously, we should not be drinking alcohol ourselves, but I think it's even considered wrong to be at the table that somebody's drinking alcohol, to my understanding. So that's definitely one boundary that I had to set, is like trying to avoid that situation, which how can you really avoid it if you go out to dinner with your family, you know what I mean? It's like to a restaurant and you don't know if they're going to order alcohol or not. It's very complicated and it can be very weird because it's like, am I supposed to ask them not to drink alcohol? Like, I don't know what to expect. But for me, it just kind of became spending less time with them in general because they were more, you know, more disrespectful about my faith and less supportive. So in a way, it made it harder, but in a way, it almost made it easier to set boundaries as well because I realized, you know what, like flat out, you are pulling me away from Allah. You are pulling me away from my faith, and I don't need to put up with that. Like, I can't do it. You know what I mean? Like, for my own faith, for my own mental health, for my deen, and for my hereafter, I can't condone spending too much time with you. So, setting boundaries in these kind of situations where your family is disrespectful or very unsupportive of your faith, it might look like telling them, you know what, I'm not going to have this conversation right now, or just removing yourself from the situation. If you don't even want to sit there and have a conversation about why you're not going to have the conversation, because I think we all have been in a situation like that before where we're kind of like, you know what, I can't do this right now. Like I'm just not going to I'm not going to engage in this. And the person's like, wow, so you're just running away and oh, you're this and that. And like, you don't even want to talk, whatever it might be. And so if they're not even gonna, if they're gonna do that and they're gonna make a problem even about you trying to be mature and set a boundary, then you can just like remove yourself from the situation and just say, I have to go. So that might be part of it when people are engaging in just a disrespectful conversation with you, just talking at you, making assumptions about you, or saying they don't like how your hijab looks, or they don't understand why you don't, do these things, even though you already explained it a million times. They keep saying that it's weird and oppressive and whatever it might be. When it gets to that point where it's not a matter of ignorance, it's not a matter of they don't know, it's like you've told them time and time again and they continue to press you on it, continue to make you feel bad, continue to embarrass you and belittle you for your beliefs, that's when it's really time to learn boundaries and to learn when you can't have conversations with certain people and when you have to put boundaries on how much you see them in general, unfortunately. And for me specifically, I live with my family. So that's been difficult, but I also am out of the house a lot of the time. So it's not terrible. But it's definitely been hard to like remove myself from situations when I live in the same house. But if you have the advantage of not living at home, if you live on your own or with your spouse or you have, a family of your own, then definitely if you're in this situation, you should put some kind of limits on how many conversations you have with them, in my opinion. Never pushing them away and never cutting them off from your life entirely. But I do believe there should be a limit on how much you interact with them in those situations. And something I'd like to share here is a verse from the Quran from Surah 29. So it's verse 8. It says, "We have commanded people to honor their parents, but if they urge you to associate with me what you have no knowledge of, then do not obey them. To me you will all return, and then I will inform you of what you used to do." So, as I already mentioned earlier, the Quran makes it very clear that we need to respect our parents. We need to listen to our parents. We need to never disrespect or bring harm or just like be bad to our parents. Like, we need to be very, very good to our parents and take care of them. They have so many rights over us. And the only time, this is genuinely the only limit I have ever seen on that in the Quran or in anything related to Islam. The only boundary I've ever seen on the respect we should give our parents, or not even, it's not even a boundary on respect, it's a boundary on when we should listen to them, right? Because the verse says, don't obey them if they're urging you to believe in another god, basically, or associate with me someone else. That's what it's saying. So this is a very important verse in my opinion, because it shows us two important things. First, it shows us how much we should care about our deen, and how our deen is number one. Our faith is number one over literally everything else. That's the first thing that I see from this verse. And the second thing is that we should always respect our parents, and that our parents are very important, and respecting our parents is very important, and treating them right. However, it's not more important than respecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing is more important than that. And Allah is always number one, but you should always respect your parents as well. And just kind of learn to balance that issue. So when your parents are trying to pull you away from Islam, like for me, I've had situations where my family members are actively trying to have me take my hijab off. Like they don't want me to wear it in certain situations. Or I've had people offering me, people from my family offering me something with pork in it without telling me. And I've mentioned this somewhere before, but I'm actually vegan. I've been vegan for 2 years before I even became Muslim. So it's not like you know what I mean? It's not like they forgot or something. Like I've been vegan for a long time. I haven't been eating animal products for many years now. Um, and I would still have instances where I was being offered something with bacon and fat or whatever it might be, and was not told that. So when it gets to that point, it sucks. It's very unfortunate, but that is, we are given that commandment from Allah to not obey them in those situations. Obviously, don't eat pork, don't take your hijab off, or don't, whatever it might be, drink alcohol, because I was definitely offered alcohol from my family as well after converting. So don't engage in these sins and these things that have been made very clearly forbidden for us, just to appease your parents. Definitely don't do that. That's definitely a boundary you need to set right away. But as I already mentioned, we should also be putting boundaries on how much time we spend with family members who are actively trying to pull us away from Islam and make us sin and try to pull us back into their religion, and not respecting our faith. No matter how many times we explain it to them, they don't respect it, they don't care, and they keep trying to pull us away. You need to put boundaries on how much time you spend with them. You need to put boundaries on how much time you talk to them, and honestly, how much mental effort you give to them. Okay, so next I'll move on to non Muslim friends. So, specifically, like your friends that you had before you converted. This again can be very tricky setting boundaries with them. What I want to say here is if you are a new Muslim, the reality is you are probably going to lose friends. That's just the truth of the matter. If you live in a non Muslim country, um, you're probably going to lose friends for converting to Islam. And it sucks, but it's the reality. And it doesn't necessarily mean your friends are Islamophobes either, because that's probably going to happen as well. You're probably going to experience some amount of that. But this is also probably going to come from the sheer fact that sometimes we have friends that genuinely the only reason we hung out with them was to do something that now as Muslims we don't do. So, for example, go to parties, drink, whatever it might be, smoke weed, or um, like even if it was something that's like not terrible, but like going to concerts or doing whatever, like things that we probably shouldn't be engaging in as Muslims, depending on the situation. But of course, alcohol and anything that's going to intoxicate us, definitely not. So if that was the kind of friendship you had before, where it was kind of like that's pretty much what brought you together, was to go out and party or to do whatever, the reality is that friendship's probably not going to survive you converting. It probably won't. But inshallah, it'll bring you comfort knowing that if the friendship didn't survive your conversion to Islam, it wasn't meant for you, period. Like it had ran its course already, because that's not a true friendship if it's based off of something arbitrary like partying or drinking. That's not a friendship. And it's definitely not a friendship if, when you're going through life changes and finding yourself and discovering what you believe in, if that's a reason for someone to leave and not want to be your friend anymore, that was not a friend to start with. Now, on the other side of that, inshallah, there will also be friendships that survive your conversion to Islam. And although you might have partied together, you might have done whatever together, these were real friendships that you genuinely cared about each other and wanted the best for each other since day one. And so the friendship will survive, because even though you're not doing the things that maybe you would used to do, the way you guys used to hang out, you're not doing those things anymore. It doesn't matter because they just want the best for you and they want you to be happy and you want them to be happy and you care about each other. And in my opinion, you shouldn't let go of those friends. Of course, don't do the things you used to do with them anymore. Like if it was you would go out to bars. Obviously, don't just because they're nice to you, don't go to bars still. You need to set those boundaries very firmly that you don't do that anymore and make that very clear to them. But that's what I'm saying. If they still continue being your friend even after that, in my opinion, you should never let go of that friend because that's a good friend. That's somebody who really cares about you and again wants the best for you. And even if they're not Muslim, if they don't share the same values as you, I do believe they deserve a place in your life because they're still going to be there for you to support you. And the boundaries here, I mean, because you're probably going to still have to set boundaries with almost everyone that was in your life before you're a Muslim. Boundaries here might look like, again, definitely, not going to the places you used to go and doing things you're not supposed to be doing anymore. But it also might look like just spending less time with them because you know that they engage in things that you can't do anymore and you shouldn't be doing and aren't good for you. And you don't want to keep slipping back into that. You know what I mean? So it might be, you can't hang out with them too much. And also, you can't hang out with them in certain situations. Those are some boundaries you might be setting. But again, I don't think it's wise to throw these friends out and be like, well, I'm Muslim now, you're not Muslim, and we can't be friends because I can only be friends with Muslims. I don't think that's a good idea at all for two reasons. First of all, if this person stayed your friend, they probably were supporting you when nobody else did. And that is worth something. That's not somebody you should just toss out and pretend that they don't matter because they do. They do matter. And that person is very special. That's one reason. And the second reason is that you can do dawah with them, since obviously if they have open minds and open hearts and they care about you and they care about others who are different than them, you can always be a good example to them and show them what Islam really is about. You know what I mean? So, again, I really do not recommend throwing out your old friends just because they're not Muslim, but rather kind of striking up a balance between not spending all your time with them and also not spending time with them doing things that are not appropriate for you as a Muslim anymore. So making sure you're balanced, but not throwing them out either and not just moving on from them and forgetting them. So that's my advice with your non-Muslim friends after converting. And the last group I want to talk about is fellow Muslims. So after you convert, you're going to have, obviously, probably most of your interactions are going to be with Muslims now. And so there's going to be different boundaries that you're going to be needing to set here. Probably the boundaries are not going to look so much like we can't go certain places and do certain things because they already know that. So the boundary is going to look different here. So here, one thing that was very, very salient for me when I was thinking, what kind of boundaries do we have to set with fellow Muslims once we convert, specifically with born Muslims? All of these things are less an issue with fellow reverts. They can still come up, but especially with born Muslims, the first thing that came to mind was people asking, why did you come to Islam? Tell me your story from Islam. Tell me about your past life. What did you used to do? What did you used to drink? Did you used to do all of these things? Like, they're fascinated by it. They want to hear all the details. They want to hear your whole life story. They want to hear your trauma, everything went wrong in your life, and every heartbreak that ended up in you finding Islam and converting. They want to hear everything and they'll say, oh, it's like an iman boost to me, whatever, which is great to hear that it helps your iman. But it's, at the end of the day, it's my suffering. It's my trauma. Because most likely, if you converted to Islam, it was somewhat traumatic at some point. Because the reality is, we live in a very Islamophobic world nowadays. So it was probably not easy. At least it wasn't easy. If at worst, it was straight up traumatic. So, what I want to remind you here is that you are under absolutely no obligation to tell literally anyone your journey to Islam, why you became Muslim, especially what you used to get up to before you're a Muslim. Nobody needs to know those things. Nobody is entitled to those answers. If you want to tell them, because you feel comfortable, because you want to tell them, because it's your own choice to, go ahead. Nobody's stopping you. But never, ever let somebody make you feel like you owe them an explanation of why you became Muslim, because you don't. Period. No one. No one deserves an explanation. Again, if they want to hear it, great. And, born Muslims sometimes get mad about this when they hear me saying that like, oh, we just were curious and we just wanted to know. I'm sorry, I'm not asking you about your trauma. I don't come up to you and say, hey, what's the most traumatic and life-changing experience you've ever gone through? Tell me all the details about that. Any normal person would be like, why are you talking to me? Who are you? And what's wrong with you? But somehow when people ask, oh, tell me how you became Muslim, they know, honestly, like, come on, guys, stop for a second. You know that it was probably somewhat traumatic, if not very traumatic. The reality is a lot of reverts lose their family over this. They lose most of their friends. They might lose a spouse. They might go through a divorce because of this. They might lose their kids, you guys. Like, seriously, think for a second. Be compassionate. Think about everything they've had to face. Because Muslims in the West already have to face Islamophobia. And then reverts on top of that have to face rejection from their family, rejection from their original community, the country they're coming from. And then oftentimes a lot of rejection from the Muslim community that they're trying to be a part of. We just get rejected, rejected, rejected. It is so hard to be a revert. And I'm not trying to complain, but what I'm saying is you have no clue what somebody went through, and it's not your right to know. It's just not your right. It is just not for you to ask about. So going up and asking people, wait, so how did you convert? Tell me your story. I know you're not thinking that it's a bad thing. I know when Muslims ask that, they are not or born Muslims, they're not thinking this is a bad thing to ask or I'm hurting them or whatever. But I promise you, we're sick of it. A lot of us. And whenever I say this, there's some reverts who are like, I'm fine sharing my experience. That's great. I'm happy to hear that you're fine sharing your experience. That doesn't mean the rest of us are. Okay? Because the people who got rejected from their family, got kicked out of their house, and were made homeless because they converted to Islam, I don't think they're going to be fine telling their story if they're not ready to, if they're not in the emotional place to. So don't say that. Don't do this pick me thing of like, oh, well, I like telling my story, so it's fine. You know what? I have told my story many times publicly on YouTube, on Instagram, and everything. And yet here I am advocating to not ask people. It's different when you're telling it than when you're asking it. You're not entitled to ask that. I'm just telling you right now, whoever's watching this, you're not entitled to ask anyone how they became Muslim. And if you're a revert, you're not obligated to tell anyone why you became a Muslim. And absolutely not obligated to tell them about your past. In fact, I would highly advise you not to tell them about the sins that you used to engage in. I would highly recommend you not to do that. Privacy is highly important in Islam. This is very, very important, okay? And if you're Muslim, you know that. So why are you asking? Why are you pressing people? Okay, so the reality is we can't change other people. We can't change what people ask us, but we can change what we tell them. So these situations might look like you responding and saying, you know what, it was actually a very difficult process, or it was a very difficult time in my life, and I'm not comfortable talking about that right now. Or even if you want to tell them and just like make it a one sentence thing, like barely telling, like, I had a Muslim friend and kind of learned about it from there. And if they want to press for details, you can tell them, you know what, I'm not comfortable talking about that. And nobody has the right to tell you, but I want to hear it. But it'll boost my iman. It'll boost your mom. Go read the Quran. Go pray. Go to the masjid. Don't come to me and ask about my trauma to boost your iman. No, that's not fair. If you want to hear about a story, a revert story, go look it up on YouTube. There's probably thousands of them. Don't go ask some random person who's not even presenting it. You know what I'm saying? That's not acceptable. Do not ever feel obligated to tell your story. So that's just one thing, but just in general, this is something that I've noticed, is that sometimes born Muslims will bring up your past or whatever it is and want to press about it and learn more, especially men, to revert women. Again, they have absolutely no right to do that. And actually, from everything I've heard, and Alana knows best, we're not supposed to talk about our past sins. It's actually better not to talk about those things. Like, it's preferable to not discuss the things that we used to do in the past. Whether we were born Muslim or revert, we're not supposed to talk about our sins, from my understanding. Because I think the wisdom is it kind of like normalizes it, And the crazy part is, this is just a tangent, but sometimes in the past when I didn't know that, when I would tell people, they'd be like, wow, astaghfirullah, I can't believe you do this and that. And I was just telling someone in person the other day, no, no, no. You don't get to tell me astaghfirullah. And I wasn't telling this at someone. Like I was talking to a fellow revert and we were like ranting about it. But you don't get to tell me astaghfirullah for something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has forgiven me for. Everything I did before I converted, if you're not familiar, those sins are wiped clean. They're gone now. So for you to say astaghfirullah to me, oh, no, no, no. We are going to have a problem if you do that. That is so disrespectful. I can't believe people do that. It's unfathomable to me that someone would say astaghfirullah and have this judgmental tone about something God himself has forgiven me for. We know God forgives you when you convert to Islam. It's like you're a baby. Everything's wiped clean. And you want to say astaghfirullah to me after asking me to talk about my past sins? Absolutely not. Do not tell anyone something you're not comfortable with. And honestly, I would advise you probably not to share your story too much in general. That's what I've learned over time, and I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not sharing it anymore. Something else that might occur is that you might have had Muslim friends before you converted to Islam, and once you convert, you start learning more about Islam and just becoming more focused on your deen. You might start to realize that these Muslim friends you had before you converted are not really at the level that you're striving to be at. Or in other words, they're not even trying to be at the level that you're trying to be at. You see what I'm saying? Like they don't care about Islam the way you care about it. And honestly, again, in this case, it's better to limit your time with them because you don't want to let them get you off track. Just because they're Muslim does not mean they're a good influence on you. It is exactly the same issue as with your non-Muslim friends that you had before you converted to Islam. You don't want them to get you off track. You don't want them to get you focusing on the things you shouldn't be focusing on. So you need to keep your eyes out and don't make your threshold for friendships, oh, well, they're Muslim, so good enough. You know what I mean? Especially if they're the type of friend who's like, oh, it's really not that big of a deal. Like, just, like, I don't know why you care so much about this or that. You don't want a friend like that around. Honestly, you don't. Because as this cute little phrase goes, I heard recently, a friend in Dean is a friend indeed. And it's so true. And if it's a friend who's pulling you away from Dean, that is not a friend. You know what I'm saying? So just be on the lookout for that. You're probably going to have to set boundaries with those friends if you have them, just in terms of like how much time you spend with them. Another boundary you might have to set with Muslim friends or just with Muslims in general that you're interacting with is when it comes to Islamic advice. This is, again, a very specific one that you might encounter. You might have people giving you Islamic advice, quote unquote. And sometimes it might sound a little unfounded. It might sound like, where are you getting this information from? Like, what are you talking about right now? You know what I'm saying? Please keep in mind you're under no obligation to take advice from a fellow Muslim just because they're Muslim. If they say it's Islamic advice, if they say it's a ruling or it's an obligation, ask them for a citation kindly, like you don't have to be mean about it, but ask them where they're getting it from and then look it up yourself. That's my recommendation I'm going to give you is ask for their citations, ask for, just in a nice way, like, hey, can I ask you where you're getting that from? Or is it from a hadith or, where does that come from? Get the information and then do lots of research on your own and come to your own conclusion. And if it's a big issue, definitely go to a sheikh and ask them, what does this mean? Like, is this true? Don't take advice from random Muslims just because they're Muslim. That's something that I really needed to learn. And that's a boundary I've really had to set. Is that sometimes, whether it be my Muslim friends or random Muslims I meet wherever, if they're giving me some advice saying you can't do this, you have to do this, whatever, I'll either ask them for where they got it or I'll just look it up on my own or ask a sheikh and figure it out for myself if I actually believe that or not. Because when I first converted, I would have just believed it blindly. You shouldn't do that. Please don't do that. Please learn from my mistakes and figure it out for yourself. Because again, once again, just because they're Muslim doesn't mean they're a good influence. Just because they're Muslim doesn't mean all of their Islamic advice, again, quote unquote, is accurate or coming from a reputable source. Do your own research. You're Muslim too. Don't have imposter syndrome. Don't forget that. You are Muslim too. You can do your own research. You don't have to take their word for it just because they're born into Islam. So I think that's where I'm going to close it today. Hopefully this was informative or helpful or something that you can relate to. and use going forward, whether you're a revert of, a few days or a revert of many years or a born Muslim, whatever situation you're in. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you again very soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.